Hello everybody, I'm Jim Ward. I'm a tour guide, regional tour guide here in the west of Ireland. I'm also a writer, among other things, and welcome to Galway, Galway City. Galway City is Galway, the capital of the west of Ireland, the capital of Connacht, the gateway to the Gaeltacht. Gaeltacht is the Irish-speaking area in Ireland. It's been confined in recent years to the west coast, west of Donegal, Connemara in Galway, West Kerry. There are other Gaeltachts in the country, one in West Belfast, one in Meath, one in Waterford. But Gaeltacht is an Irish-speaking area where they speak Irish as a predominant language. The rest of Ireland, as we all know, speaks mostly English, but it's a bilingual country as well. We learn Irish at school. Galway is the capital of the Gaeltacht. It is the capital of the west of Ireland. This is Galway. When you arrive, just straight ahead of me, I'll show you the vision in a minute, is this Galway station. You will arrive in Galway, or the bus station. You will see I'm standing in Galway city centre. This is the city centre of Galway, called Ayr Square. It's a square region, traffic lights on each corner, donated to the people of Galway in 1712 by the mayor of Galway, Edward Ayr. That's where it gets its name. It used to be called the Green, and I'll explain to you now in a minute what the area is about. This park behind me is John F. Kennedy Park, because President Kennedy, JFK, came here in 1963 and addressed the people of Galway. Also, when he was assassinated afterwards, they renamed the park JFK Park. So I'll show you Galway. Welcome to Galway and enjoy the tour. There we go, here we go. This is the front area here. Railway station is up there behind that truck. Hardiman Hotel, used to be called the Great Southern Hotel. Built in 1852, the Railway Hotel. Many film stars have stayed there. Rex Harrison, John Wayne, making the movie The Quiet Man, famous film set in the west of Ireland. Hotel taken over during the Irish Civil War by both the IRA and the Free State troops. Move around here, pan around here. The houses you see beyond the trees there straight ahead of you, that's where the old walls of Galway came in. Originally this park, this green, called Gallows Green, because straight ahead of you there was an executioner's gallows where they hang people for various crimes. Gallows Green was a square outside of Galway. If you just look at this map here of Galway, you can see where my thumb was the jousting area, the green we're talking about, Ayr Square, where they jousted, did sword fighting and all that. The gate underneath it there, where my thumb is again, William's Gate Street, named after King Billy, King William of Orange, because Galway was a loyalist town for one period of its history. Goes down through the old inner city of Galway. There's the map of old Galway. That's a 1651 map of Galway by Speed, John Speed, a map maker. That's the city we're talking about. So here we go. We just march on up here. The walls of Galway, as we see, went along that straight ahead of you there. We're going to go down through William's Gate Street. The gate was. Just pan around slowly here and see where we are. John F. Kennedy Park, Ayr Square. Yes, the bar straight ahead of us here. The bar across the road there, called O'Connell's Bar, is owned by a man who I'm friendly with, but it's also the pub where Ed Sheeran, the pop star, filmed his video Galway Girl. He filmed it in that pub, and at the back there's a beer garden where you get pizza and all that. The other pub he filmed Galway Girl in was O'Connor's famous bar in Salt Hill. Neighbours of mine, as a matter of fact. I grew up near O'Connor's bar, Salt Hill in Galway. They filmed the other part of the video there. So let's move on here. Again, the walls would have been along there, extended there. This was outside the city centre. We move up here, we look at the monument where JFK, President Kennedy, spoke in 1963. And on top here, you see the writing is in the same thing in the Gaelic script. Remember, Irish had its own original script as well. Lots of languages have their own script. The Roman alphabet has replaced a lot of the other languages in around the world. There's the Roman script there. But the Irish had its own script as well, and that says the same thing in the Irish language. Let me just pause for a minute and talk. Yeah, why did President Kennedy visit here in 1963? Well, basically, it was election year coming up in the next year in America. He wanted to get the Irish vote. He had no doubt of that. But it was like, he was really like what we would call in Ireland the returned Yank. He came back to his roots because during the Great Hunger of 1845 to 1851, the Great Famine or Great Hunger, Great Holocaust, call it what you want, 1 million Irish people starved of hunger and 1 million, over a million emigrated, mostly to the United States. JFK, his great-grandfather, P.J. Kennedy, left Wexford, in County Wexford in Ireland, to go to Boston, where he set up a tavern. Of course, his son was involved in Boston politics. Joe Kennedy, the patriarch of the family, was the first Catholic to go to Harvard. John F. Kennedy, his son, went on to become most powerful man in the world. It was a great victory for the Irish in America because having been a starving immigrant in 1851-52 when P.J. Kennedy left, to his great-grandson becoming president of the United States was a great achievement. So when Kennedy spoke here and he addressed the people of Galway in 1963, he said, I'll put on my best Kennedy voice now and I'll just say, I bring you greetings today from the people of Galway, New York, from Dublin, New Hampshire, from Kilkenny, Massachusetts, from Limerick, Maine, and from Shamrock, Texas. Sorry for my Kennedy accent, but these were all towns, Irish named towns in the United States. Irish diaspora or immigrants had named those towns after places in Ireland. Kennedy also, I mean, let's go into the causes of the famine and Great Hunger and all that. Basically, after the penal laws in the 1690s, Catholics in Ireland were forbidden to own land, own property, enter the professions, go to be parliamentarians. They were literally subsisted on land. 95% of the population paid absentee landlord class 5%, total 5%. So they subsisted and broke up the land on potatoes, which is the only crop that they could grow without being penalized with taxes for it. I mean, the very word, you've heard the saying daylight robbery. Well, daylight robbery comes from the fact that, you know, the old Irish peasants had to pay for every window they had in their cottage, had to pay rent or taxes on it. That's where daylight robbery comes from. So when the potato blight hit in 1845, the people just starved. They had nothing else to eat. They were subsisting on potatoes. They starved. 1 million died, 1 million emigrated, it's estimated. So let's go on again with Kennedy. When Kennedy was here, he said to the people of Galway, if you go down in the bay, meaning Galway Bay, and the day is good enough and your eyes are clear enough and you look west, you'll see Boston, Massachusetts. And then he asked, how many people here have relations in Boston that you'd admit to? And of course, the west of Ireland was full of people who had relations in Boston. So they all put up their hands. And he put his own hand up too, because Kennedy was a man of the people. He could do that. Let's move on, folks.
Jim, you have a lot of people congratulating you for your good accent of Kennedy.
I have a good Kennedy. Well, I'm glad I can do Kennedy's accent because I can barely do my own. Here's this man here. How are you, sir? We move over here. I want you to, this is the plinth here that was erected in 1984. In 1984, Galway celebrated 500 years as officially as a city. In 1484, King Richard III of England granted Galway city status, meaning it could elect a mayor and a city council. And 500 years later, in 1984, they erected this sculpture here. It's actually a fountain, but it doesn't work. So in a town really where it rains 306, how many days in a year? It rains 366 days in Galway. We feel like it rains 366 days a year. The fountain comes on once a year to clean it out. The sculpture is designed like the sails of a Galway hooker. A Galway hooker is a traditional sailing vessel in Galway Bay, used to transport, to fish, first of all, and then to transport turf from one end of the bay, from Connemara, where the bogs were, to the other side of the county, or across to County Clare, across the bay. Galway hooker, and these are the sails, what they look like. They're rust-coloured, they look like that, and that's what it's modelled after. There's 4 grades of hooker: on board moor, the big boat, lawad, half boat, glowchog, and pucon. There's a famous pub in Galway named the Pucon as well. This is the Brown doorway. Brown being one of the families or tribes of Galway that took over when the Normans invaded. This was moved here in 1905. It contains the crest of Martin Brown and his wife, Marie Lynch, another tribe of Galway. The tribes would have married and each other and all that. So this was the doorway was moved here in 1905. The banners we see along here, all those, there's 14 of them. And each of them are named after what was called the 14 tribes of Galway. Galway is the city of the tribes. It got, first of all, there were when the Norman invasion came after the 1170s in the 12th century, which was basically a land grab. The Normans grabbed the best land in Ireland. The Norman families took over Galway sometime around the 13th, 14th century, and they were derisively called tribes by the Cromwellian forces, but they used that as a badge of honour in the end. So Galway is the city of the tribes because these 14 tribes governed Galway for many centuries, and there are familiar names like Joyce, Lynch, Kerwin, Martin, Darcy. Darcy and Kerwin are actually Irish people who joined the Normans, Irish tribes who joined the Normans. The rest of them are Anglo-Norman, and they have their own crests. And the crests are not necessarily linked to heraldic crests. They made their own up sometimes as well. So that's why Galway is called the city of tribes. The bus is obscuring, you're just behind the bus there, in front of the bus, should I say, is the statue of Liam Mellows. He was a Republican general executed in the Civil War. He led the 1916 Easter Rising in Galway, where about 600-700 men volunteered to rise up under him in 1916, 105 years ago, to free Ireland from British rule. It's the declaration of the Republic in Dublin. Galway was the second largest uprising outside of Dublin in 1916. The badge I'm wearing on my jacket is an Easter lily. It commemorates those who died in 1916 and for Irish freedom. And people wear it, where Republicans wear it during Easter week, which we're in at the moment. We move on down, we're heading in towards the city, the main city itself. Galway, by the way, is pedestrianised, most of it. So you can walk on the streets without being run over, you know. The street we're entering now is Williams Gate Street. This is where the gateway to Galway was. Usually you get busted, a hustle and bustle of crowds and buskers. Galway is synonymous with busking. Buskers on the streets, people drinking coffee on the streets, you know, sitting outside cafes, bars. We haven't that now because of the pandemic, which is unfortunate, but there are some people around. The day is good. So this is Williams Gate Street, named after, of course, King William of Orange, King Billy. After the war between the two kings, James and William, in the 1680, it's from 1689 to 91, Galway became run by the Williamites, and they named the streets. Some interesting places here. Just along there, the Abbey building on the left-hand side is the Franciscan Abbey. The Franciscans are here as well, been here for a while. Now, unfortunately, there's scaffolding on this building here, this green building here. This is the treasure chest, a famous, it's a famous tourist place because you get souvenirs and all that. But I want to point out significance. We mentioned Ed Sheeran and the Galway Girl video. Well, Ed Sheeran's mother comes from Spiddle in County Galway. It's in the Gaeltacht. And Ed Sheeran began at the age of 14 busking outside this premises here. There are photographs and some film of him doing that. Unfortunately, we can't see the building, the facade now because it's covered. I want to point out something else as well. Top of this building here, you see a ring on top of the date something that looks like a ring, a diagram there. So bring it over here. You see engagement rings, another ring. That's a sample of the Claddagh ring. It's called Claddagh because it's named after the Claddagh region, which is west of Galway City, just over the river. Claddagh is the anglicised version of Claddagh, which means seashore in Irish. And it was a fishing village going back to the 5th century, where they elect their own king. The king is elected annually, the 24th of June. He's elected for life. They have a current king is a man called Michael Lynch. He's king of the Claddagh, and he was traditionally to solve disputes between fishermen because Claddagh was a fishing village. But the Claddagh ring is world famous. You may see people wearing that ring. The heart is for love, the crown for loyalty, the crown on the top of it, and the hands for friendship. And the story goes that Richard Joyce of the Joyce family of Galway, one of the tribes, was sailing to the West Indies in the 1600s when he was abducted by pirates and brought to Algeria or Algiers to train and he was put into service as a jeweler. And he became a jeweler, and when King William came to power, he demanded the release of a lot of slaves, and Joyce was released, and he was returned to Ireland, where he became a warden, or once got stewardship of the Claddagh, which is the fishing village, and he named the ring that he came up with the Claddagh ring. That's one story of its origin. There are evidence that in the Spanish Armada boats that, in fact, some rings have been found with similar design to this. And the Spanish Armada was 1688. But the story about the Claddagh ring is when a girl is wearing the ring and the point of the heart is towards her fingertips, she is single. When the point is towards her heart or up towards her arm, she's betrothed or engaged or has a boyfriend and can't be asked out. So you avoid a girl with the ring, a ring going in one certain direction. Yeah, just find out. The main artery there on the center of the map, from the gate down, that's where we're heading now in the old map, the 1651 map, the main central artery. We have a busker here, do we? Oh, there's music certainly along here. Here we go, Butler's Irish chocolate, very good chocolates, top class quality. I must admit the hot chocolate drink in there is really to die for. I mean, it's really good. Garvin's Bar, famous pub. It's got a snug in it, you know, a little snug for where the women used to drink in the snug and the men in the pub. Garvin's Bar, famous pub. I want to point out something here now as well. Top of this wall here, there are two crests of tribes of Galway. When families married, the tribes would have married. They would have put the crest of their families outside the houses they lived in. Over here too, and on this building here, a window here that looks sealed in, but it's an old architectural design of the old buildings of Galway. I'll show something better here now. Down here, the building on the right-hand side with joke shop and whatever, you've got Phone City, all that. That's called the Pro Cathedral. That was the old Roman Catholic cathedral in Galway. I think it was first opened around 1831. Before then, when it was first opened, the penal laws were still in existence. So Catholics were forbidden to do a lot of stuff. But the merchants of Galway still decided to get together, and they erected this building, the Pro Cathedral, for old Roman Catholic cathedral, called after St. Nicholas, who was the patron saint of mariners and children, and of course Santa Claus, St. Nicholas. There's 3 churches in Galway named after him. Here we got a busker. If you can hear me now, I want to talk about this building here. This is, as you can see, Lynch's castle. It dates back to the year 1500. It's a fine example of an Irish tower house in an urban area. In the 14th century, the 1400s, I should say, King Henry VIII gave a grant, Henry VIII of England gave a grant of £10 for the English colonist families to build tower houses around the country.
Jim, can you hear me? We have a question.
Yes, sure. We have a
Katya is
question.
asking if people are living in this building in the upper floors, or
No,
if
yeah, I would.
they're just offices
This,
and cabins.
yes, I'll explain to you. It's the oldest building in Ireland still working commercially. It's now a bank. The question I was asked was, are there people still living here, or is it working? It's working as an office building for banks. As you can see, the main crest there with the line underneath is the Lynch family crest, because it's Lynch's castle. The crest beside it is the King Henry VII, who came to the aid of the tribes in the Battle of Knockdoe, where the tribes really took control of Galway from the De Burgos, another Norman family that controlled Galway. Battle of Knockdoe was 1504. And the significant thing about the Battle of Knockdoe was a huge place north of Galway, where the tribes fought the De Burgos for control of the city. And it was a huge battle. People were slaughtered in thousands there. And what happened was, it was the first battle where the first gun was used in Irish warfare, and they couldn't operate the gun, so they used it as a club and whacked guys over the head with it. So we move down here. This is Shop Street, where the shops are. It's usually pedestrian, usually bus thronging with people. Buskers, everything. Did you like the busker, folks? Any comments?
Yeah, I think they did. It was really nice to hear someone live.
It was nice to me too, because I hadn't heard a busker for a while because of the lockdown situation, pandemic. We're not getting that. Just if I walk down here for a bit, I'll show you something here. This is called Buttermilk Lane. Galway is full of lanes. This is Buttermilk Lane, little laneway. The church at the very end is the Augustinian Church. The orders, the religious orders have settled here. We saw the Franciscans back the way. The Augustinians are here, the Dominicans, the Jesuits. That window protruding out there, just on the left-hand side. The famous liberator Daniel O'Connell, when he'd been appearing in courthouses in Galway, as he was a barrister as well, a lawyer, he would make his speeches and his practice speeches on that window. Daniel O'Connell, that's the liberator. O'Connell Street in Dublin is named after him. So we go down here. These are electricity boxes. Galway City Council have commissioned artists to do various artwork on the electricity boxes. But I want to show you this thing here, this stone here. Common to many cities across Europe and in Ireland as well. It's the only one I can see in Galway. This stone here, what's it for? That is for if a gentleman had a horse years ago and he left it outside a building, he would mount the horse by standing on the stone.
Larissa is asking if Ireland is closed to visitor at the moment.
There are certain countries that are green lighted across Europe and some countries that are red lighted. I think the EU and the United States are green light. You can come into Ireland. You may have to quarantine. I'm not sure the regulations there at the moment because they change, but there are some countries that are you will definitely have to quarantine or can't come in from, and there are other countries where, such as the United States and the European Union, where it is green light, you can come in, as far as I know. These railings were around Eyre Square, where we've just been. We started the tour. They were put here in 1984 for the centenary year. This church here is also St. Nicholas Church. It's a Church of Ireland church. It's the oldest, we've seen the oldest building in Ireland, Lynch's Castle, working commercially. This is the oldest parish church still working as a parish church in Ireland. St. Nicholas, it was celebrated its 700th anniversary last year. It's 701 years working as a church. It has moved between the Catholic faith and the Protestant faith through the various conflicts down the years. It's now a Protestant or Church of Ireland church. Inside, there's a tomb of a Knights Templar who would have fought in the Crusades. When Cromwell's army took Galway in 1652 after a 9-month siege, they demolished the statues. There are statues with defaced angels and all that inside. It has the regimental banners of the Connacht Rangers, which was recruited in the west of Ireland as a British Army regiment when the British controlled here, disbanded in 1922. The church there, and just where I'm pointing that is St. Nicholas Church on the map. One thing to be said, another thing is that inside you have a replica of Speed's map, the famous 1651 map, which I'm showing. Just point out the clock tower. The clock tower only has a clock on 3 of the 4 sides of the tower. And they say, the old saying, you wouldn't give the time of day to somebody, comes from this, because on the west, when the Norman families ran Galway, when they controlled Galway, the Irish weren't really welcome. They had a thing in the rule book saying no Owen or Mac shall strut or swagger through the streets of Galway, meaning anyone with O or Mac in their name, O'Connor, O'Brien, MacDonough, McBride, they weren't allowed, they were Irish names, weren't allowed to strut or swagger through Galway. That's leave their swords at the gate and all that. So outside the western gate here, they had was the O'Flaherty clan, which used to control Galway before the Normans came. And the Normans inside the town were so scared of them, they had a prayer on the inscription of the gate leading westward saying, from the ferocious O'Flahertys, dear Lord, deliver us. Because if the O'Flahertys got you outside the walls, God knows what would happen to you. But anyway, so they say that they wouldn't give the time of day. The clock doesn't face out west to the O'Flahertys. They wouldn't give them the time of day. That's where that one comes from. Just to point out over here, the big domed building you see in the background is Galway, another St. Nicholas Church, the Cathedral of St. Nicholas and Our Lady Assumed into Heaven. It's the Roman Catholic Cathedral since 1965. We've seen the Pro Cathedral, which was the old Roman Catholic building down there, the side road. That was built in 1965. It was the site where Galway jail was, where incidentally, my grandfather was once put into Galway jail he was a volunteer in 1916 looking for Irish independence. And for his sins, he got put in there. He was sent to Fermanagh in Wales, but it was Galway jail. A lot of other people were too. Galway Cathedral, built in 1965. It's made out of locally cut limestone. There's some fine mosaics inside. The Bishop of Galway at the time was a guy called Michael Brown. He was a very strong churchman in the days when the Roman Catholic Church had very strong power in Ireland. And of course, he had 2 doctorates, 2 PhDs, and he would have visited the old cathedrals of Europe in his youth and would have got ideas from them. So when he built this cathedral, it's a repository for Irish art. There's mosaics, there's fantastic sculptures and stuff inside there. And the funny thing, as I say, limestone, he had a hands-on role in this building. And the funny thing about it is that, you know, the Taj Mahal in India, well, the Irish for Michael Brown, this was the bishop, is Mihal. So they call that building the Taj Mahal. Interesting. This is Market Street, Galway's historic market. It's an ancient market, goes back centuries here. Every Saturday there's traders with their produce, vegetables, sculptures. It's now got more arty and trendy. There's paintings and other stuff, sculptures, but it was vegetables and spuds and chicken and all kinds of produce. What I want to show you now, this window here. Again, we're back to the family Lynch. Lynch Memorial window put here in 1978. This is the old site where it was. I'll just point it out here. That window there. Move back if I can. It's an old building. The legend, again, the Lynch family have gone into history because you've heard of the, I'll just go on to. Can't you got me again, okay. The Lynch family have gone into history because in 1493, the story goes, the mayor of Galway was James Lynch Fitzstephen, and he was trading with Spain because Galway has historic trade with Spain. Galway traded with Spain, Portugal, south of France. They imported wines and fruits, and they exported woolens and animal produce, fish to those countries. So big trade, and the mayor of Galway, James Lynch Fitzstephen, is trading with Spain. His son, a guy called Gomez, son of a Spanish merchant, wants to come back and visit Galway. So Mayor Lynch guarantees his safety in Galway, and Gomez comes back with him, meets Walter Lynch, Mayor Lynch's son, meets Agnes, who's Walter's fiance, gets too friendly with Agnes, and jealousy incurs, and Walter murders or kills Gomez and is put on trial. And this is one of the legends. This legend goes back to the 1820 Hardyman's History of Galway, which was its verification isn't accurate, but some visiting priest in the 19th century found some records in Rome of the same, or in Spain of the same event. But anyway, Walter murdered Gomez, and Lynch has gone guarantor to Gomez's dad. He look after him. Also, there's great at risk the trade between Galway and Spain. So the people don't want, they surround the house. They don't want Walter to be taken to the gallows. So in January, January, I think 1494, from that window we just saw there, 1494, January, Mayor Lynch hanged his own son from that window, and they say that is where the word to lynch somebody or to hang somebody comes from. Although there's other competitors for that title, because there were two officers called Lynch in the Army of Virginia who did unsavory acts as well back in the day, and they think Lynch comes from those guys as well. But that's just one claimant to the word to lynch. I want to bring you down here and show you the smallest museum in Ireland. And for anybody interested in James Joyce, this is Bowling Green. There used to be a bowling green here years ago. That's where it gets its name. At the end of the street was a slaughterhouse once upon a time. This was a street of butchers, farmers, soldiers in the British Army. Find out something here. This is the smallest museum in Ireland. It's closed now for lockdown, has been for a while because of insurance issues. Nora Barnacle. Nora Barnacle, as we know, was the wife of James Joyce, the writer. He was a Dubliner, as he never let us forget. In all his works, Dubliners, Ulysses, all Dublin, Finnegan's Wake, a lot of Dublinese there. But Nora was his muse. She was the Anna Livia Plurabelle in Finnegan's Wake, Molly Bloom, Greta Conroy in The Dead, the John Huston film from the short story. She lived here, family lived here between 1894, and Nora's mother died in 1940. Nora herself died in 1951 in Zurich, where James Joyce died in 1941. It's a small museum. It's just 2 up, 2 down. It has the same preservation as it was in the old days. Nora Barnacle, there's famous stories about her in Galway. Let's move on. You might like that. Again, we're into Market Street. The market would be here. Let's go through St. Nicholas Church. We see that we can't go inside because for pandemic conditions it's closed. But check it out. Primary school over there, St. Patrick's. Years ago in St. Patrick's, every morning they'd raise the tricolour and play the national anthem. I had a mate of mine, a friend of mine, who used to be late for work. When he'd be passing the street here, he'd have to stop and wait for the national anthem to be over, and and he'd be looking at his watch and saying, "Come on, come on." Sheridan's cheesemongers, good cheese in there. Si vous voulez le fromage, c'est bon le magasin.
Nice French, Jim.
Merci beaucoup. J'avais appris beaucoup de français à l'école, mais j'ai perdu depuis que j'ai quitté l'école. Comprenez?
That's still good.
Merci. Thank you. I was just speaking in French there to Blondine and to the French audience. St. Nicholas Church. It's said that Christopher Columbus prayed here in 1477, and when he was here in Galway, he incidentally in 1492, when he went on to discover the New World as it became, there was a Galway man, William of Galway, on his crew. But Galway was a very seafaring town. But in 1477, when Columbus was here, apparently a canoe washed up in Galway Bay with the bodies of 2 natives with tattoos, and there were cocoa shells and coffee beans or whatever in the canoe as well. And Columbus knew they weren't from Europe, so he figured India was west of here. And that gave him the notion to sail west later on. 1477, he prayed in that church. There are numerous stories connected with the church. Indeed, it features in Julian Gough. He's a Galway, well, he's from Tipperary, but he went to university in Galway. He's a writer in Berlin now, famous writer. He's written a number of novels. He features in one of his novels, Jude, Level 1, I think, features that church. Let's just go here. Tí Chomhairle is a famous traditional music pub in Galway, trad music. The lettering you see there is a fine example of Irish Gaelic script. Tí means house in Irish. Chomhairle is a guy's name, so Chomhaire's house or House of Chomhairle. The dots over the letters there and the dashes and all that, the dots would be replaced in modern Roman script by a H now after the word, which is why Irish looks like there's a load of H's in it. It's called a chevu. It means you either don't pronounce it or you pronounce it gutturally. Tí Chomhairle, but how you pronounce that. Here we go, the Claddagh ring as well. Here we have it again, the heart, the crown, the hands. Heart for love, hands for friendship, crown for loyalty. In 1981, there was hunger strikes in the H blocks in the north of Ireland, and 10 men died in hunger strike, and the man in this shop here erected this plaque for Bobby Sands, Francis Hughes, David McCreesh, the men who died. Another pub, another great music pub across there, Taft's pub. The writing there saying Ceol and the dash and then Bia. That's Irish. Ceol is music, Bia means food. The dash is an abbreviation for and or agus, meaning and. Griffin's Bakery, fine bakery establishment, closed now. Usually you get buskers and people doing sean-nós dancing and all that around here. We'll talk about this pub in 1 minute. I have a lot to say here, but we'll just go down here. Another example of the 1615 stones. These were erected around the town. The names of two families would have married. This building is the King's Head. Okay, story about it. In 1649, it's starting to rain now, a soft day in Galway, right? Okay. They say in Galway when you can see the Clare Hills opposite Galway Bay, it's going to rain. When you can't see them, it's raining. So we know what it's a nice soft day starting now. So 1649, Oliver Cromwell won the English Civil War and King Charles I was beheaded. Now, regicide was a big crime, so you had to hide your identity, even if you were an official executioner. So when the Cromwell's army took Galway after a 9-month siege in 1652-53, the new mayor of Galway, appointed by Cromwell, was a guy called Colonel Peter Stubbers, who wasn't a very nice guy. He exported lots of Irish men, women, and children to the West Indies as slaves, white slaves. If you go to the West Indies today, a lot of the black families have Irish surnames, where they would have met the Irish people. So basically, Peter Stubbers was given this place to live. And in 1660, fast forward 1660, Charles II is restored to the throne of England. He gives the Act of Indemnity, pardoning all associated with his father's execution, but he leaves out one man. And that one man is Peter Stubbers, who is firmly believed was the executioner behind the mask of Charles I. And as his reward, he got Galway as his reward. And that's where he lived, and that's the King's Head. There's another, the original, one of the original maps by Speed of Galway, the old map I'm showing, this one here, is actually inside in this pub. Let's move on. Down here to the left is the old malt. 100 years ago last November, Micheál Brannock or Michael Walsh was a councillor, Sinn Féin councillor in Galway, and he was abducted in November 1920 by British forces, brought down here, where we'll see the area in a minute, where he was shot in the back, and he was one of the victims of the Black and Tan brutalities back in 100 years ago in Ireland. He was an elected councillor at the time as well, must be remembered. Another busker there. Let's have a look. Pete, how are you? It's Pete. Hi, Pete, thank you. Shop there on the right, Sonny Malloy. Sonny Malloy was a character. Sonny was a character. He had a drapery shop in Galway, a bar named after him. He had it down here in the street, just in the corner here. Bunch of grapes, not a good pub. You see, normally you'd be people sitting outside drinking their pint or drinking their Irish coffee, or buskers around. So you don't have it today because of the pandemic and lockdown. Again, across the street there, we see the sign for the Cathedral. Here's a man, this is Mr. Tommy Houlihan. Say hello, Tommy.
Hello, how are you keeping?
Not so bad.
Lovely to meet you, Jim.
Come on.
Yeah.
There we go. There's the Cathedral. Just down at the end there, we have Meralty House. It was owned by the Daly family. It wasn't the official residence of the mayors of Galway, but it got the name Meralty House because the Daly family, for a certain period, controlled the mayorship. Now, more importantly, across here, this is Sean O'Naughton's pub, T. Naughton. Because it had an Irish name, 100 years ago, the Black and Tans fired shots in it. They were the British forces. And it's significant in Galway because it's the townhouse of Richard Martin from Dangan, who owned Ballynahinch Castle and much lands in Connemara. This was his townhouse. He was an MP, member of British Parliament for Galway in 1822, where he brought in the first animal welfare legislation anywhere in the world. And he set up the RSPCA, Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. He was known as, he was Richard Martin, he was known as Humanity Dick because he was humane to animals. And this was his townhouse. And he was also a hair trigger Dick. He was a duelist. He would kill you in a duel if you upset him. And interesting enough, we go down here. Wild geese. Place here. Down here we got Kirwan's Lane. Kirwan, one of the families of Galway, named the lane after it. Humanity Dick Richard Martin had a theatre, the first theatre ever in Galway, down here on the right-hand side. And we can walk down here. We'll walk down here. We'll just take a detour and we'll walk down through here. Kirwan's Lane. So the theatre was on the right-hand side. It was the first theatre in Galway, and his wife, Eliza, acted here with the tutor of their children in the 1780s, who was none other than Wolfe Tone. And Wolfe Tone was an Irish patriot. He was a Protestant Dublin man who went on to be the founder of the Irish Republican movement. And we see this, all explains it here. He was the father of Irish republicanism. Being a Protestant, he wanted to unite both Catholics and Protestants to overthrow British rule at the time. And he acted there as a young man with Eliza Martin, Humanity Dick's wife. Lovely restaurant here, seafood restaurant. Back up, this is where we came from. This is the street we came down on. Again, there would be people drinking coffee on the streets, sitting outside their pubs, cafes. McDonald's Fish Bar. Here we go, another fine, well, not a fine example, but it's another existing example of an Irish urban townhouse. We've seen Lynch's Castle, the most finest preserved in the country, working as a commercial premises. This is Blake's Castle. Blake being another tribe of Galway. Before Galway Jail was built, which is on the site where the new Roman Catholic Cathedral is, as we explained, this was a prison once. We move on. This area across here is called Spanish Parade because the Spanish galleons used to come in here when there was trade with Spain. It was also known as, well, let's do some graffiti. We'll look at some graffiti, guys. This is the Latin Quarter in Galway, I forgot to say. It's called the Latin Quarter because it's kind of sunny and festive. Yeah, the Spanish Parade across there is also known as the fish market because the women from the Claddagh would sell the fish that the husbands caught from the Claddagh fishermen. Straight across the river there, which is pointing my camera now across the river, is the Claddagh. It's a 5th century village, old thatched cottages. They were demolished in the 1930s, replaced with local government housing, which are still there. They elect their own king. It existed outside of the walls of Galway. Fishing village. Church across there is the Dominican Church. The Dominican order came to Galway as well.
Jim, we have a question from Colin. He says, I'm seeing a lot of cheese shops and fish restaurants, but are there any vegan places in Galway City?
Yes, there's a number of vegan places in Galway City. Vegan places in Galway? Vegan. Sorry, the guy that's with me is a vegan. I was going to add. There's a number of vegan places. There's the Lighthouse restaurant. Falafel place. Yeah, the falafel place. You get falafels and chips and all that. There's another place there in University Newcastle. What's it called? Yeah, there are a number of vegan and vegetarian restaurants as well in Galway. It's actually starting to, what is it, hailstones now. So we get the 4 seasons in 1 year in Galway City. Just across there, the fish market, Spanish Parade, you see the 2 arches. They're Spanish Arch. They were fortified with cannon years ago to defend the Port of Galway. The Port of Galway was here before the docks was built. The Spanish galleons came in, and they were bringing wine and brandy and fruit, and exporting woolens from Connemara, and fish from the Claddagh would go out to Spain, salted fish. So the walkway, the Spanish Arch there, it's called Spanish Arch because the galleons come in, Spanish galleons. The walkway through there is where Micheál Brannock, Michael Walsh, was shot, as I explained to you, from the old Malt House. And it gets the name the Long Walk because during the famine, when the people were emigrating, the starving people were emigrating, they would leave on the coffin ships, as they were called, because many of them never returned. Some of them were thrown overboard by ruthless sea merchants and all that. So they would walk through the Long Walk, and it got the name the Long Walk because they would never return again to Ireland. Just move up here. The river. Here we go, more graffiti on the electricity boxes. Good artists there doing that. This is the river going through Galway, coming from the lake. It's the River Corrib. It's the fastest flowing river in Europe in an urban area. Very fast. Sometimes it gets so high up, it's up to the very top of the bridge. That's Wolftone Bridge. The fisheries tower over there was to keep an eye on fishing stocks, erected in 1841, I think, in 19th century. So we move along here. Galway gets its name. The original name for Galway was Streamstown, or Balla na Strahan in Irish, Streamstown. It gets its name Galway. There's a number of theories. Gallia being the Irish for Galway, and Gal being the invader or foreigner, because it was a Norman town. It could have got it from that. It also, they think, is called from Galvia, who was a daughter of an old Irish chieftain who drowned in the river. And apparently she's supposed to be named after the river. Or the town is named after the river. Galvia. The river the reason it's a fast flowing river is because it's a small river in length, but the second largest lake in Ireland feeds into it, Lough Corrib. Just a couple of miles up the way here, or a few kilometers up the way here. You have Lough Corrib feeding a huge mass of water down through the small channel river, giving it its speed. The buildings there were mills, and as you know, Flocchio is an eco-tourist company, so you can harness the water. And the mills, you see the mill wheel there. Again, we see the dome of the Cathedral in Galway. The bridge ahead of us is called O'Brien's Bridge, named after William Smith O'Brien, the young Irelander, in the rebellion of 1848. But it was the Western Bridge. It was the gateway out of Galway once upon a time. And it was over this bridge that the famous inscription from the ferocious O'Flaherty's "Dear Lord, deliver us" was written. So the day has brightened up. Well, it was bright when we started the tour. It's now got duller. As I say, the four seasons in Galway.
Is it still not raining?
It's just getting drizzly, damp. I think we're looking for a wet, damp day. But tomorrow, the weekend is promised to be fine again. Like I say, you get the four seasons sometimes in one day. Remember, we're only in April showers. So I can just cross the street here. There's the bridge. The Garda, or Irish police station, is down there. We can walk along here for a bit longer. Some nice houses there. The backs, the rear ends of houses. Just over there is the big grey building. Is the old Purses Distillery. Purses was a whiskey manufacturer, which apparently supplied the King of England his whiskey years ago. It closed in 1912 because there were people cloning the whiskey, and there was legal cases and all that, so they closed it. Just, you can't see it from here, but on that, the straight across the river there, it's called Nuns Island. It's a little island in Galway, surrounded by water, and it's Nuns Island because the Poor Clare convent. If you've seen the movie, the Zeffirelli movie, Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, made in 1972 or 3, Judy Bowker plays Saint Clare, and she set up the Poor Clares, and they're an enclosed or religious order. Apparently they pray, they're enclosed and they don't go out, they pray for the sins of the world. And the legend has it, when they're hungry in Galway, they ring a bell and people leave bread outside the gate. And that hasn't been done since the 1600s. Little canal there to the right. Galway Cathedral again. The Tashmi Hall. The building with the scaffolding straight ahead, you might see it on the left-hand side, is the County Club, where dignitaries, professors, whatever, would drink and eat without being bothered in the streets or in the pubs by people. It's kind of gone out of fashion now. We've seen, there was an old county building, we've seen it in Ayr Square where we started our tour. It was in the background there when I showed the Lee Mellows statue. It was a building there, the old County Club. It's now an office building. It's a county club, you've seen those gentlemen's clubs where they sit around snoring and drinking brandy. Well, that's kind of Galway's equivalent. There's the cathedral again, the Tashmi Hall. So we could go back. So guys, that wraps up you can walk, folks. Folks, you can walk the inner town. Galway is a city of approximately 75 or 80,000 people. City, capital of the west of Ireland, gateway to the Gaeltacht, Connemara. You can walk the inner town in about an hour. It's a small town, medieval streets. It's not wheeled, sort of circular streets, not the grid-like layout that other cities like Limerick and Cork, Dublin would have. It's more of a medieval, what was a walled city. I've shown you the map. So I think, Blondine, we can wrap it up there. And if there's any more questions, I'd be delighted to take them.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Jim. It was a very nice tour, and people are saying thank you, and there's no more question for the moment.
Okay, one question I did get was the badge I'm wearing, and that's the Easter lily. As I say, it was to commemorate the Easter week 1916, where volunteers rose against British rule and proclaimed the Irish Republic. And of course, I have a historical relationship with that, and I always wore the Easter lily. People, it's kind of going out of fashion, but in parts of the country, you'd see it been worn, and it's worth promoting. So thank you, Blondine. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Jim. Have a
À
good
bientôt. À bientôt. À bientôt.
À bientôt.
Merci. Bon.